This is Greg Canty here, and welcome to the Win Happy podcast. Stay tuned for interesting chats with interesting people about winning their lives and being happy at the same time. This show has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I had the pleasure of the company of the much-travelled media professional Vanessa Conneely. Vanessa is a warm and fascinating character whose love of her profession and her curiosity has taken her all over the world, living in interesting places and working across all types of media. She chats about her life and career, about the changes in media and where she feels it is all going, and the amazing story of adopting a 6-year-old boy from India. And yes, we did talk about St. Patrick's Day and what it means to be Irish abroad. Let's hear from Vanessa. Vanessa Conneely, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Well, thank you is right. We got here eventually. I don't know how many attempts, and a few of them we had to abort or postpone, and I think it was my fault pretty much every single time. So apologies, and great to see you.
Not at all. I hope I'm worth the wait.
Oh, I've been building this up in my head big time. You've got one hell of an incredible CV. I think you've worked across every single different type of media. And you've travelled all over the world. And I'm not even going to attempt at putting a shape on it other than to get you to start telling me about your story, if that's okay. And we can see where it takes us.
Absolutely. Okay. So I am a Galway girl. I grew up in Galway, there in the west of Ireland, loving it. Ag Lart Gaeilge, not enough Gaeilge, but tá sé agam fós. And I wanted to be a journalist since I was 13. I was doing a project. One of my still biggest passions is the environment. And I turned vegetarian at 11, and I was doing a project on recycling at 11, and I went into the local newspaper, the Connacht Tribune, and a lovely guy there called Kieran said to me, "Would you like to see our print and press?" And I said, "Sure." And he brought me down to this mammoth, they don't exist anymore, huge, big, clunky factory in the middle of Galway that you wouldn't have known was their printing press. And I was hooked. I just was like, this is so cool. I don't know why, I just loved it. And then always loved English and writing and history and reading and stuff like that. But still, that was the moment for sure. I just came out and I was like, I want to be a journalist, whatever that is. I just want to be it. So I was very, I met my husband at 14. I was a very well-rounded preteen, how boring. And I just always kind of knew what I wanted to do. So yeah, that's kind of how it started.
And was there any of that in the family? What did your mum and dad do?
No, nothing. My dad's an accountant and my mum is a legal secretary. No, not really. We don't even come from like an artsy family in any way. I just, good storytellers. I think that's what it is. And the more I travel, the more I realize that not every culture is. And it's funny, Cillian Murphy said it recently, when asked for the millionth time why Irish people are doing so well at the Oscars. And he said, because we're brilliant storytellers. And it is true. We tell a brilliant story. I feel like you are, you sit around the table and the story better have a punchline or it better have, it better be good. Otherwise there's just, it's not the same in every culture. And I think I notice it in, maybe like I lived in Turkey, the Turks tell a great story. They have a great sense of humor, Arabic culture is very similar, very oral. And I think that's what we do so well.
Yeah. Where does that come from, do you think? Why do we have that in us?
I just think that I love the Irish view of life. Like I've moved home after 15 years and I just love it. I love the banter. I love the outlook on life. Irish people have this, not all Irish people, but there's such an element of this cerebral, of this kind of, just this kind of funny like you could just go to a guy go to the toilet in the pub and come back and have a story. You're like, what? And other cultures don't see life that way. They just don't. They just get up and they do the thing or whatever. And they just don't see the oddness, the curiosities, wonder what that guy, the nosiness, but the kind of well-meaning nosiness. And I just love that. And I'm relishing every day since we moved home last year, and every day I'll spot something. Like, I'll give you an example today. I was going into Super Value and I just saw a sign and it just said grave flowers with flowers for the grave under it. But to me, it read grave flowers. And I was like, well, that's quite stark for the flag. And I almost took a picture of it to put on social media and just be like, yeah, this is Ireland. This RIP.ie, this kind of like just funny things like grave flowers that I don't know if everyone notices, but my dad kind of has that sense of humor too, and you'd be like, anyway, that's what I really think it comes from.
Yeah. And as a country, I wonder, is that from, and I'm not sure, we can make up all of this in our heads if we want to, but is it from a bit of poverty and a lot of rural living and families just sitting around a fire and sitting around the candle without lots of entertainment and just entertaining ourselves? Is that the music and the storytelling? Is that where it comes from? And are we a bit arrogant to think that other countries just don't have that?
I don't think it's coincidence that we do so well abroad, you know what I mean? And people, yes, look, there's this constant argument, Paddy's Day is coming up. There's this constant argument about buying into our paddywhackery, you know what I mean? But what it does for us, I still think that we are able to navigate it where we don't sell ourselves out. I mean, not everyone will agree with that, but I think we have such a soft power, such a soft diplomacy. I mean, I remember listening to an interview last year with Gavin O'Reilly from Virgin Media, and he was saying how he went to the White House with the Taoiseach last year, and he talked about being in the room and the access that Irish business people have in that room that the other amount of countries would kill to have that kind of access that we get to this superpower. I'm not saying the US, I don't think we should always be kowtowing to the US anymore. I think we need to figure out our balance there, geopolitically, because we can still, are we European or are we American? Sometimes I think we struggle with that as a nation and our identity. But I just think like I used to work in Europe in Strasbourg. I'd see it there too. I worked with Marilyn McDonald, Mairead McGuinness, all of these brilliant women, and they're different over there. They behave differently. We know how to kind of shapeshift and maneuver, but still maintain our Irishness, And
of course, we'll get it again very, very soon with people giving out about all the wasted money with politicians travelling here, there and everywhere on the gravy train, the junkets, the great life that they have. God almighty, it's such a huge calling card. It's an internationally recognized brand. I agree with you 100%. I don't even think we realize ourselves how powerful it is.
No, and we don't utilize it enough. I think we, like, I was at an event, Fesh Ireland event there a couple of weeks ago in Galway, and they actually had a Welsh contingency over from the film and TV industry to talk about what they've done with their industry and how, especially with that language, how they've managed to kind of grow their industry. And they said, at the very end, they said, we're still looking at Ireland. We're still looking at the way you guys have done it. I think what we lack is an ability to believe in ourselves and believe in our own ideas and believe in I feel like we're still of a poor mentality. We've only been rich since the 90s, that we've only been a wealthy country since the 90s. And I think we're still, I'll give you an example. Okay. With the whole war in Gaza, and it's hard to think back now because it feels like it has been going on for so long, but like Claire Daly came out being very vocal about it, and she was one of the very, very 2 to 3 politicians that did it. That kind of tested the water. I feel like she was a bit of a scapegoat for the other politicians because people were reacting very well. She was getting a lot of international praise. People early on were coming to me. I was talking to a lot of high profile people in the UN and Amnesty, a lot of people, and they said, well done, Ireland. If you know Claire Daly, tell her well done, because she made it okay for the likes of Leo Varadkar and, the Taoiseach and so on to come out and kind of, they said, okay, public opinion is it's okay to do this. But that's where I think we're afraid sometimes to raise our head above the pulpit. I think we're afraid of getting shot down. And I think people might not think it, but we really don't have a cancel culture here yet. We don't. We still have very strong free speech. And this is what I said. People were asking me, why do you think Ireland it's so easy? And I'm talking British people. I'm not talking people, and I said, they said, is it because of Northern Ireland? I'm like, yeah, okay, we'll always go with the underdog, but it's not as simple as that. I said, it's a free speaking country. We are able to speak our mind. And that's something that I think we don't appreciate enough.
And for the most part, I think we're quite balanced about most things, even our politicians and everything. We pretty much expect all of them to behave in a fairly rational manner about things. For the most part, you're never going to see anything terribly extreme. I think we're all fairly rational and logical and explain what you mean, and that kind of goes down well here. So the 13-year-old who saw these huge printing presses in the Connacht Tribune, what did you do next? How did that end up being a career? What were the few little steps you took?
Just every decision I made then was for that, people talk about kids and I do feel sorry because I think it's a lot of pressure to put on a 15-year-old, but it was, okay, what do you want to do for your leaving cert then? I said, well, I'm dropping business. I remember having arguments with my career guidance teacher, my parents, everything. I said, I'm not doing a science and I'm not doing business. And they said, you can't drop both. And I said, no, I'm doing everything for journalism. So I did it. I didn't get the points for journalism, but again, another place I think people fall down, well, certainly my generation did, of the CEO forms being too complicated, but I really was like, okay, if I don't get this, I'll get this. If I don't get this, I'll get this. So I got English and history in UCD. I was devastated that I didn't get journalism, but you know what? It actually worked out for the best, because if I had done 4 years of journalism, I think, well, one, I would have ended up with a degree instead. And instead I did 3 years of a BA in English and history, loved it, and then did 1 year of master's. So after 4 years, I had a master's. So that was brilliant then. So I did journalism and broadcasting I did UCD, and then I DIT in Angel Street, which is a good course. Yeah, not too bad. I mean, nothing. 2 weeks in a newsroom is better than any year in college. Like, it just is. It's as simple as that. You don't have to be the most intelligent person to be a journalist, but you do need grit, and you do need a kind of a self-motivation. You just need a lot of self-motivation,
And when did someone decide someday that they were actually going to give you money for this thing that you were doing?
Well, I headed off to Australia then. What a cliche. I headed off to Australia. Well, I did everything in college that I could. I worked for the UCD Observer. I mean, some of the best people have come out of there that are still working in Irish media. So I worked there, and then I went off to Australia. I worked for this travel journal, which was brilliant, crack. Also backpacking, everything, did that. And then I came back, and then I worked for a terrible magazine that I won't mention, about the auto industry. And then I got one shift in the Irish Mirror. Mick McNiff, one of the best men in the business, gave me one shift on a Sunday, and I was off. Then I got 2 shifts the next week, and then I would work a Thursday night, evening late, the shift that no one wanted to be on, and then I would go on the Vincent Brown show. He was on radio at the time, and then I worked with him later in TV3, and I would go on his show to tell him what we were covering the next day, and it was just all brilliant experience. It was full on. It was a Fleet Street mentality, even in Dublin. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was watered down, but it was still very misogynistic and very like the tabloids are very, very misogynistic, but it was still a brilliant learning curve. And you could be at a murder in the morning and the Dáil in the evening. It was great, and I learned quickly and fast, and it was great, and I worked really hard.
What was your beat?
My beat was general reporter, so that's why it was so good. I mean, I was on everything. You'd be sent to everything, kind of a general rule of whoever picked up the phone, you did that story. Or if you were free, some person might be quite busy that day, so you get whatever story, but it was fine. It was, like I said, it was a brilliant learning curve, well paid. It was the Celtic Tiger. We were out every night at some opening of a Boots cream or something, whatever it would be. It was great fun. Like, it's hard to think back, Greg, but that's the way. It was the height of like Rosanna Davison and Glenda Gilson and all of that time and we were all young and like at Lily Bordello's and all the usual. Like, it was just so much fun. I was like 24, 25, and yeah, it was great fun. It was great fun.
Yeah, at that time, Dee had started Fusion, and at the very, very early days of Fusion, myself and Dee, I had this idea to take a glamorous fashion and beauty event on tour around Ireland. and we called it catwalks. So all of the characters that you're mentioning, they would have been our models. So the idea was you get the best Irish models, the best of fashion, and you take it on tour to the best venues. And you have an exhibition area, the best of staging, lighting, and then you put entertainment on top of it, and you have lovely meals and everything. So we actually did that for a number of years. And it was Celtic Tiger stuff. And it was great fun. You mentioned your dad was an accountant. That's what I am, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I worked in the drinks industry, and suddenly we were choosing the models we wanted to use at these shows. We had to get sponsors left, right, and centre. So I'm liaising with all of the fashion houses. And each town that you go into, you had to include the local boutiques. So I'd be literally pitching into the different boutique owners. And it got so bad, I could actually go into any boutique in the country, and from the labels of all of the dresses, I'd know who their suppliers were. So you could work the different angles and all that kind of stuff. So we did that for a number of years. And it was good fun. And I know you were saying it was a very misogynistic time and everything. But there was something, we were growing up as a country. You kind of knew that the place was starting to boom a little bit. You know, it felt good for the first time in such a long time.
No, it did. And you know what I mean? I'm 44. So I feel like don't get me wrong, I absolutely think it was a brilliant country to grow up in. I feel extremely lucky that I feel like it was kind of the last. I mean, don't get me wrong, education is still free, but it's not as free as it was, you know what I mean? And it was very cheap to be a student. I mean, don't get me wrong, I had to still have a part-time job and that, but it was still fun, you know, it was still, I don't know, there wasn't a struggle that you hear of students going through now. And it was just like, there's a reason that there's a nostalgia everywhere now across, you know, like of books, of fashion, of everything, of like, you know, even Friends, of everything. It's like kind of the 90s and the noughties. It just felt like it was just before the internet. There's something in that it was just before everything became globalized and kind of the same. And like, I feel so privileged to remember what it was like to post a letter or to, you know, have a landline and all that, you know, going, because my kids won't have a clue.
And journalism was glamorous in a way. Like, there were lots of TV programs about journalists and the newsroom. Of course, they were nearly all American. But the kinds of cases they were investigating, and you had the stereotypical guys holding on to their stories and smoking away, and it was very glamorous.
yeah, and it's you know, you look back now, I think, I mean, maybe this is a bigger conversation, but like, people blame the media a lot, you know, it's always been kind of a negative, you know, it is glamorous to a point. I mean, TV, I think there's a false glamour around TV for sure. But in terms of print and that, you know, people do blame the media for things, and you just try and explain to them, like, no one wants to pay for media anymore. So this is what you get. You need to be able to take your journalist off the beat for 3-4 months, maybe more, to do like that spotlight type journalism. It barely exists anymore. I mean, this is why the likes of Data Miner and these other places are existing now, because you need AI to kind of go through things for you and try and do that work. But there's a constant discussion about how much AI will replace journalists, and it will to a point, like everything. But I still think you still need, people want to talk to people. If you have a very emotional or traumatic story, you want to talk to a person, you know?
AI isn't going to invest a case for you.
No, and it's not going to, I don't always think it'll get the nuances right of, you know.
Of course it won't. Of course it won't. No. AI isn't going to bring you to a witness or a possible lead and ask them the right questions and get that story from them and follow up the same story somewhere else and join the dots together and all that kind of thing. You know, good journalism protects us, and it is disappearing. So after your Irish adventure, where did you head to then?
So 2009, then we decided, it happened to be at the right time because the financial crisis was just hitting, and basically we decided we'd been planning to go to Canada. So we went traveling for 4 months. We did the Trans-Siberian Railway all around Asia and everything. It was fab. So we had planned to go to Canada, and the timing was quite well because the financial crash had just started. So we headed off to Canada. We went traveling first for 4 months, and then we headed off to Canada. And then we got there in September 2009, and I worked there for 3 years. Now, people are quite shocked when I say I didn't like it. They're like, "What? I thought Canada's supposed to be so nice," and but it wasn't for me. Media-wise, it is very, very domestic. They're not really into international news at all. And it tends to be, they kind of didn't talk about the weather a lot. And I really don't mean that in a funny way, the way the Irish talk about the weather. I mean, like, that's all they talk about. But I did learn a lot. I learned a lot. Like, it was my first international, bigger newsroom, we'll say. And it was good to see they had like the money for, like, if there was a big story, they could send people, and like, they were quite good at breaking news. They had a very good, what they call chasers. So they had very good interview producers. So we'll say, for example, I would have been there for the tsunami, the Japanese tsunami, or the big earthquake in New Zealand, and to see how they could get the people up very quickly. They were very impressive that way. Also, their production was good. Their style, it was kind of style over substance, but they did do style very well. They did, you know what I mean? They great with their graphics and all that. So that was a good learning curve. But the Arab Spring kicked off in 2012, and that was the end of it for me. Then I was like, I cannot be talking about the weather when this is going on, you know. And it was frustrating at times because I would pitch a lot of stories. We'll say Toronto is the most international city in the world, so it's called it's not a boiling pot; it's a mosaic society. So the idea is that society, like, everyone can live there side by side. And I keep saying there has to be Syrians here, there has to be Egyptians here we can interview, you know. And they were like, no one cares, no one cares. And I remember it was the royal wedding, and they were just more obsessed with that. And I was just like, oh, not for me. So I applied for Al Jazeera. And I got a 3-month contract there, and me and my husband moved, never had been to the Middle East or Doha. And we hopped on a plane and went, and it was amazing. So I worked for Al Jazeera then for 3 years, and it was brilliant, a brilliant time.
So in Canada, was it a case culturally of see no evil, hear no evil?
Yeah, definitely. And it's even with their Indigenous people, I feel like there's just not enough. I don't think the average person would even realize that Canada has an Indigenous population that suffer a lot of problems with, you know, drink, suicide. Like, there's huge issues there, but they keep, like, compared to Australia, New Zealand, other cultures that have kind of been open about, you know, the past. Canada isn't, you know, and I find that difficult. I also find it a country, like, it has the biggest population of, I think, Japanese, Chinese and Indian people outside their own countries, and you just don't feel it. You know, it's a very waspy, white country, and I just didn't feel it was diverse enough. It's diverse on paper, but it's not diverse in how it treats people, I don't feel. That's what it was. And it just wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah. Was it like watching that movie Pleasantville?
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of strange, isn't it? That's very strange.
It probably sounds a bit harsh, but I know other Irish who would definitely feel the same, you know. And then there's Irish there that love it. You know. So, but also Toronto's a very grey city. I mean, Vancouver is so much prettier, but it wasn't for me.
And how in the name of God did you go to the Middle East? It seemed like, okay, that's a bit of a...
Yeah. I just emailed. I just kept emailing and harassing them. And then, like, you know, you kind of know, I knew somebody, my friend had gone, and, you know, it's like, I knew a couple of people from TV3 who were there. So I called them and I was like, what's it like? And they were like, yeah, come, it's great. And I literally went on a 3-month contract and hoped for the best. And yeah, once I was in the door, it was fine. This has been my career, to be honest, which is lovely. I mean, people freak out that don't work in freelance, but once you get in there, once you get FaceTime with people and you know, work hard, there shouldn't be any reason not to. So it was great. Yeah, it was a brilliant place to work. And then, oh wow, was it a sharp learning curve? You know, you're suddenly in a newsroom with people that speak 4 languages, and that, you know, I remember here, like, on my first or second day, I was chatting to these 2 friends who come back from Yemen, and it wasn't even Yemen. They went to Socotra, which is the island below Yemen. I was like, oh my God, it was like being on another planet, you know, especially coming from Canada where people just don't travel. And I was like, this is amazing. This is exactly where I want to be. This is, you know, so it was amazing. Doha is an interesting place. I mean, obviously with the World Cup, people kind of feel they know it a bit better now. Yeah, but it's you know, it's the richest nation in the world. It's the most obese nation in the world. Like, it has all these stats. It is, they were building for the World Cup. They literally, their grandparents 2 generations ago were fishermen, and now they're like, you know, they struck gas and that's the end of it. And, you know, it has a lot of problems. I mean, you put a load of people into a country that have no money issues forever. And none of us could cope with it, and have never worked, and are constantly surrounded by servants, and they don't know how to be on their own. A lot of them have drug addictions. The royal family. It's very complicated. It's very complicated.
So it's just an abundance of money just flowing from the earth, and they don't know what to do with it.
Exactly. And they do. I mean, there's a big, they know, and especially with climate change, they're not going to have the most valuable resource in probably in a decade, they're not going to have the most valuable resource anymore. I actually think Ireland is going to be well up there with freshwater source. I mean, I've lived in Qatar and Malta. Both countries have barely any freshwater source, so you're going to have these countries that are desperate for fresh water. And I think that's where if we did it properly, we would be extremely wealthy. Anyway, that's another conversation. But so.
As a place to live, did you have family at this stage?
No, I did have my daughter there, but not yet. No, people ask the same questions. You can't drink. You have to be covered up. But it's not Saudi Arabia. It's not Saudi Arabia. When the World Cup coverage was on, and I mean, particularly The Guardian did a lot of like stories, 100% true that the human rights abuse is 100% true. I mean, that is, I wouldn't doubt that for a second. But LGBTQ, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist, but I know loads of gay men and gay women who lived there happily. There was no problems. There was no problems at all. So, it's easy to, like, a lot of people judge, and I mean, we collectively can judge a country from the outside. And until you've lived there, you get, you know what it's like. And also they're extreme, like they're much nicer than Western culture when it comes to kids. They're much more accepting. You're a guest in their country. You're always treated like a guest. You tend to be treated very well and respected. And I didn't have a problem. I mean, the roads were crazy, but other than that, and it's very interesting. The food is amazing. You go to the souk, you'll have Iraqi food, Syrian food, Iranian food, Malaysian food, Filipino food, because there's actually more. Like, the Qataris are 500,000, and then but the country has 2 million people. So the Qataris are maybe 250,000 maybe. So they're like way outnumbered in their own country.
And tell me about the skill set that you had, coming out of Ireland. I know TV3, and you had The Mirror, The Sun, News of the World, all of that work. Did that serve you well? Is it just the same process everywhere, and you just plug into a different culture and a different organisation?
No, that's a good question. The hardest leap I made was from print to my first job was in R&AM, and I took a massive pay cut from the papers to go into R&AM as a researcher. And it was so funny. The guy offered me the job. I was like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I was like, "No, this is the time." I was like, I've got my mortgage now, so I will just figure it out. And I did, and I worked really hard, and my reporting paid off, but boy, was it a steep learning curve. And people were so kind, so kind in TV3, helping, because, okay, the writing you can do, but everything else is totally different. Pictures lead, and it's just very different. But it was fine. And after that, then it was just plug and go for the most part. I mean, moving to Al Jazeera was another steep learning curve, just for geopolitics, for the actual information. I remember, like, I'd come in and I'd see the news sheet, and it would be like Bhutan elections. I'm like, Google's where is Bhutan? Google's CAR, where is Central African Republic? What, like those kind of things. So, but like really every day you would just be learning, and you just knowledge base. I mean, they do Africa so well. Africa is so underreported, and Al Jazeera does a fantastic job of Africa. They obviously know the Middle East so well. You get such a different perspective. You like. Subsequently, I traveled a lot, went to Iran and went to all these like cool countries, like, and you just kind of see, then you just get a different perspective, and you understand the mechanics of the Middle East a bit more, and the US influence and the French influence and the British influence on these countries, and the damage,
And is there a danger in those places that you're going to get something totally wrong because you just don't understand the territory, the culture, all that kind of stuff?
No, it's funny. It's, again, another good question. No, and it's like, people hate when I say this. The most dangerous place I ever lived was Dublin. I lived in Dublin for 10 years. That is the most dangerous place I've ever lived. It's where my car got broken into the most, where I felt threatened all the time by junkies. Just that low level anxiety of, you can't, if you were sitting outside a pub, I would never leave my phone on the table because it'd be, could be swiped. Or just as a woman walking home, as a student, like I think back and I go, God, I put myself in danger so many times. And I'm talking walking home at 11 now at night, like not 3 a.m, 4 a.m, but it's just not okay. Like, that a city is that dangerous. It's just not okay. And I just feel this kind of even recent, the recent stories about the looting and everything. I'm like, why are we surprised? It's just a mess of a city. And it's just not for me. And I'd be terrified if I had a child going to live there, to be honest. I really would.
Yeah, we have offices, as you know, in Dublin and Cork. And so as a result, I spend a lot of time up there. I was heavily involved in Dublin Chamber. I was on the council there, all that kind of thing. And I think you see Dublin with the eyes of an outsider a lot of the time. And I'd be saying things, and I'm thinking to myself, with a lot of my colleagues around the table, are you not seeing what I'm seeing? You take that Lewis from the train station in, and you're looking at that antisocial stuff. You hop off the Lewis then, just down off O'Connell Street, which an iconic street, but Irish history. Jesus Christ almighty, you're taking your life into your hands. Something we used to love doing when we were there is going up to the gate for plays on a Thursday night, and you might decide to have a nice pleasant walk down O'Connell Street, and God, it's like anything that side of the river is just so dangerous. There's a dirty raw edge to it. And for all that we were saying at the beginning about Ireland and the lovely banter and all that kind of thing, I hate when people come to Ireland and their experience is Dublin. And the thing that I say to people, Dublin has got a lot of the horrible things about a big city and not enough of the nice things. Then, of course, about Cork, I say it's got a lot of the nice things about a city and not so many of the bad things. And I actually genuinely think that's a nice thing. We're only a big village, really. I think Dublin, it's got serious issues about it. But when you were away, God almighty, in Doha, not a bother.
Not a bother. Oh God, no. Doha was insanely safe. But then we moved. So then my husband lost his job. So we had to, the thing in the Gulf is that you can't work for 2 years. You have to leave the country for 2 years and come back. So we were like, okay, this is annoying. So
why? What's that rule about?
It's just a visa thing. So you can't be job hopping, basically. It's just so you can't be job hopping. I think they're quite controlling. It's still a kingdom, so, but I think it's, as far as I'm aware, it's the same in Dubai. I could be wrong. But I think back then, but I just know for sure it was Doha. So he couldn't have worked for 2 years. So he said, okay, fine. What will we do? So I said, I'll just keep working until we figure it out. And then I had been on maternity leave. So I went back and I said, right, I'll take another 3-month contract and see where we are at the end of it. And life is amazing, a little bit of magic. On the second day back, my boss said to me, can we chat? Anyway, basically he poached me and about 25 others, and we opened Turkey's first English speaking station. So off I went to Istanbul, skipped out the door, love and life, and we had a great time. We were there for 3 years and it was one of the most amazing places. So connecting to the conversation about Dublin, Istanbul is 20 million people. I was there 3 years. I think we had one incident in that. I mean, it was amazing. I remember saying to my husband, going, now our daughter was really small at the time. I was like, we can't be leaving the buggy everywhere. We can't just be doing like we did in Doha, where you just walk, you want to go into a shop, the buggy's too big. You just leave the buggy outside with your bag and everything in it. You walk in. We can't be doing that. Turkey was almost even safer in a way. Well, it wasn't. Doha was very safe, but it was so safe. I mean, it was so safe. And the thing is, you stand at a mile, you see, as an expat, you stand at a mile. So they all know you. They know your daughter. They know everyone. You are in a big city, but we were living in a place called Ortaköy, which is just under the bridge. And it's a village within a massive city, but it is a fabulous place. I'd highly recommend it to anyone.
So while we're all working in Ireland and the biggest move you make is from Cork to Dublin and back again, and we're doing serious things like buying houses and mortgages, you can't even dream about that. I presume you're just packing up, renting somewhere else. Are you even buying furniture in any of the places where you're living?
It's funny you should say that, because like in Doha, I moved 11 times in 3 years. It was disaster. It was a disaster because I was on rolling contracts. I wouldn't even bore you with the details, but Al Jazeera it was just a mess. That side of it was chaos, which kind of a lot of people leave because it can be very chaotic. So it's not all sunshine, even though it is all sunshine actually technically in Doha. But you know what I mean? It can be tough in that sense. Doha is hard to live in. Don't get me wrong. It's not for everyone. There's a lot of people who complain, but it's the golden handcuffs. A lot of people stay there because the money is so good and it's tax free. So But Istanbul was different. Istanbul, first of all, it was all paid for the move. So we had people to do that first, and then, and to help us speak Turkish and find a place and everything. So that was fine. But, yeah, no, it wasn't nervous. We'd been on a weekend break to Istanbul and we liked it, but it was just more, I don't know, it just wasn't a big deal. We'd one daughter at that stage and she was one, and it just kind of landed on our lap. But we didn't, like, our option was move home or move to Istanbul or try and find something else. But we were fine. We were fine. Just
What does your daughter make of all of these changes?
She's such a home bird. Oh my God, she's such a home bird. She's Ireland, Ireland, Ireland. Like, ultimately, it's our kids that basically voted that we move home, you know?
Yeah. Cool. And there was a few more moves left in you, was there, after Istanbul?
Yeah. So then what happened then? So a couple of things happened. So one, yes, career was still important, but personally, we wanted more kids, and we'd always wanted to adopt. So we tried to start the adoption process in Turkey, and the Syrian war was pretty bad. And not that had anything to do with it really, but it was just that it just wasn't going to work. The language barrier, it just all felt a bit weird and a bit, I don't know, it just wasn't going to work. It was going to be way more difficult. So, and secondly, my husband couldn't get a job because of the language barriers. So after 3 years, as literally broke my heart to leave. It took me about a year. It was like breaking up with somebody to leave in Istanbul. I had to be wrenched out of the place. And I said to my husband, okay, you find a job and I'll follow you. I don't mind, wherever. It had been a tough 3 years news-wise. It was the time of all the Daesh attacks. There was a lot of bombings in Turkey, a lot of bombings in Istanbul, PKK bombings. Our offices were raided during the coup. It was the Syrian refugee crisis. So there was a huge amount of Syrians going through Turkey. You know, it was that awful 2016 year with Brexit and Trump. Most of my life was by news stories. That's how so like Donald Trump, Brexit. It was like David Bowie died, Prince died. It was just, the BBC alert would go and we'd all be like, this year is the worst year. So no one would visit because of the bombings. And yeah, it was tough. Anyway, so my husband couldn't get a job. So then we said, okay, I said, go wherever and you find a job. So he found a job randomly in Malta it's as random as it sounds.
What does he do?
He's health and safety, but it's just because it's one of the only, now Ireland and Malta are the only two English speaking countries in Europe since Brexit. So he found it, plus it's a British system of health and safety. So he was able to, it's the same legal system. So that was fine. So we went there and we started the adoption process, and it took longer because of COVID, but we adopted a little boy from India, and then I got pregnant again. And then so now I have 3. So yeah, so adoption was another adventure, which was amazing.
Wow. And what prompted you to do that? Were you struggling to get pregnant or?
No, not at all. No. Just, it was always, again, back to 13-year-old Vanessa. Do you know where it comes from? I'm going to laugh at this now. There's 2 things. I studied Pride and Prejudice. I can't believe I'm telling you this. I studied Pride and Prejudice from my junior cert. So from first year, very impressionable 12, 13-year-old. There was 2 things in it that I know I did. One was Lydia elopes. I didn't even know what eloping was until I read that book. I eloped. Me and my husband eloped. It was the best idea I'd ever heard. I didn't even know I was ever going to get married, but I said, I'm not having a big wedding. I'm eloping. We eloped to St. Lucia. It was amazing. And the second thing, and then the other book I read was Wuthering Heights, and Heathcliff. They adopted Heathcliff in it. And I just thought it was such a great idea. And I think it was always there that I would love to adopt. And then just being a journalist and, covering so much more and more and more and more and more. I was like, if you could just help one kid, I would have adopted 2 if we could have, but it's very hard to adopt siblings. So
was that very complicated?
The adoption process?
Yeah.
Was it complicated? The hardest part is waiting. A lot of people ask me about it now, and there's a lot of couples and a lot of women with fertility issues, and they're like, I'd like to do it, but I'm too old and it'll take forever, and trying for a baby takes forever and there's no outcome, whereas adoption, there is an outcome. I think it's not talked about enough. I think people are too close-minded in terms of, we said 0 to 5. That would put a lot of people off. That gave us an advantage. Most people want 0 to 2. They don't. There's this idea that the older the child, the more issues. I don't think that's fair. Our son was 6 when we got him. Yes, he's memories and will always have memories of the orphanage in India. And his story alone is worth the whole podcast. But But no, I think it's so rewarding. It's hard, but just being a parent is hard, and
It makes sense what you're saying, isn't it? Because everyone wants the little baby that's kind of theirs forever in their memory, and a bit older, and obviously that story is going to be different. So did you pick a country to see what country is this going to be feasible with, or how did it work?
You don't get much choice in that way, in the sense that whatever country has relationships with other countries, so kind of like agreements with. So our choice was Portugal. Bulgaria came online when but we'd already committed to India. So there was Portugal, India. I can't even remember. There was 4 countries. Portugal, the caveat was they would be over 6. So one thing we were kind of emphatic about was that our daughter would stay the oldest, and our social worker agreed. So we wanted her to stay the oldest. So that was important. So that's why we didn't go for Portugal. Now, because of COVID, he was 6 when we got him anyway. But we had decided, we had matched with him at 4 when he was 4, so yeah.
This might sound weird now, but when did you meet him? And what I mean is, when was the first time you saw his photograph and, he was one of the possible children you could adopt? So when was the first moment you saw him? When did your relationship with him start?
Yeah, no, just it's a perfect question, because we'd been on blanket emails or mass emails about other children, and it's difficult. There was horrendous stories. I'll never forget, I can see their faces, 4 children in Portugal whose parents had been killed in a car crash. But I don't know how they had no other relations, but they were an emergency case. I was like, oh my God, I really did probably consider it for maybe like 10 minutes. I was like, could we do it? Oh my God. And then there was another case of a little girl. She was 3, Joanne, and but she had such, she had severe, her mum was an alcoholic and a drug abuser, and it was just, she had terrible symptoms, and she had an older brother. Do you take the brother? So we said no to that. So then his little face came in, and we were like, instant. I was out for a run. I just was walking the end of the run, and I just stopped. I literally stopped, and I just went, that's him. It sounds like such a cliche, but I did. I said, that was him, his little face looking up at me. And I was like, yes, please, immediately. I was like, please, me, please, me, straight back. And she was like, great. So that was it. And then we did.
What's his name?
His name is Aryan.
And is that the name you gave him, or was
that was his Indian name? I said, I said I would keep it. I just think I don't personally. I wouldn't change a name. I think it's
I think you're right.
Their story, and I think that they've been called it for the first possibly 2-3 years of their life. So he's Aryan Sean.
Sean.
Yeah.
I presume you know all the backstory and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we do. We worked with as much as they know. I mean, they work with the charity, who have drawers, effectively. They're big drawers at a police station, and then the mum comes and they put the baby in and they shut the drawer and they walk away, So, I mean, we talk about her, his tummy mummy, a lot. Not that much, but we do talk about her. And I feel this is the one thing I wasn't expecting, to have this connection with the woman in the world so closely. But I'll never meet her. I'll never know who she is. And, she's out there every day thinking about him. It can be quite emotional at times when I think about it, but I'll do my best by her as well as him.
Yeah. I had a woman on the podcast, and at a very early stage, the mother and baby thing in Ireland, well, not quite. She gave her child up for adoption. And with all the rule change in Ireland, now she's praying for the day that her son will say he wants to meet her, because I think up until now he said he doesn't want to, and it's killed her. And she's gone on to have kids and everything else, but it's haunting her. I know it's absolutely haunting her. To the best of my knowledge, she does know who he is and where he is, but she's not allowed to do anything. So she's waiting for that moment.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, isn't it? It really is.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. Yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And it's just to have to carry that every day. And, you never then possibly forgive your younger self, that kind of way. It's just so hard. It's so hard. And
so from the photograph moment to actually meeting him, was that a big gap?
God. Yeah, so yes, unfortunately it was, because of COVID. It should be about 6 months. And I'm reluctant to tell people this, because I don't, all I want is people to adopt, but people need to do whatever is comfortable with them, I like for them. But just when I see so many people struggling, and I'm like, I think the love is the same. The love is absolutely the same. And the joy is the same. And the rewards are the same. In some ways, they're better because you realize it's so, this is the difference. This is the difference with an adopted child, especially an older one that I didn't think. But you see a person who is fully formed almost, and like we're every single day we see his resilience and his bravery and his tenacity and the stuff that he learned to do on his own. And sometimes you're just parallel beside him, whereas with your other kids, you were there for every single bit. And sometimes so it's slightly different in that way. It's almost like you're a little bit more witnessing this person, their experiences. I don't know if I've said that very well, but my point is that it's very joyful and rewarding in a different way to having biological children. So then it took a while, it took longer than it should have. And that was a COVID thing. Anyone who's considering it, I would say it was a COVID thing, nothing else. Because it shouldn't be that long. It should be as quick as possible because the child is waiting for you to. But it's funny, he didn't speak a word of English or anything. So we'd ask him now and he talks about, so I couldn't go because our youngest was only a year and he couldn't get the malaria tablet. So it's a big chapter I'm missing, but we will go back someday. So my husband went, and Arian is so funny now, and he tells us it. He's like, Daddy walked in and I was like, he's white. He was just like, who's this man? I was just like, is that him? And we did 2 FaceTimes with him. We did one on his birthday and one for Christmas. And we thought he knew. He had a clue who we were. He was like, hello. They didn't explain anything. The poor child. Well, he's okay, but he was just going, the day Keane picked him up, he was just, happy, he was ready to rock. And then imagine he never had seen ice, he'd never seen an escalator, he'd never seen it's just like one of these movies where an alien lands in it. He couldn't even run that much because he was in a building all the time. They didn't go outside and run, it was too dangerous. Terrified of dogs. We have a dog, but he got over that amazingly. In 48 hours he was over the dog. So he's brilliant, and he has this weird Irish Indian accent now. He's cool. He's cool.
So how long is he with you now?
He's been with us 2 years. 2 years in April, he'll be with us.
And did his English develop fairly quickly?
Yeah. Even the teachers are massively impressed, but that's down to him. He's very, very confident is the word, but he's just very tenacious. He's very determined. He's very hardworking, and he's very, even if he gets it wrong, he'll keep trying. He's got this lovely he's not self-conscious in that way.
And it's funny, I was chatting earlier to you about my grandchild, and you want them to need you and you nurture them. But this poor kid, in a way, survived. So he didn't need you in the same way that any other child would need you. Was that a huge adjustment for you?
We could talk for ages about this because it is very specific. So we'll say, for example, very machismo society. So he wouldn't have cried a lot. So we had to kind of teach him to cry, that it was okay to cry, things like that. So when you say he didn't need us in that way, he did, but he wouldn't need us. He would not allow himself to need us. He is very tactile. He would sit on my knee forever and just cuddle me. You know what I mean? He just really wants that. He loves hugs and kisses and everything. And so in that way, he's definitely is making up for lost time. In other ways, his room is spotless. He is like a militant. He's very respectful of stuff. He wasn't just given, it was a bit of Lord of the Flies, so they didn't have their own stuff. All the toys were not developmentally appropriate in any way. So I remember giving him Lego and he was just like, okay, lady, I don't know what to do with this. He'd never been anywhere. So how can you make something when you've not been anywhere, But then we would have done stuff like bring him to the water park in Malta, and then he would just be he'd jump in the water. He can't even swim, but he would just, there was no fear there either. So we were very lucky because, he could have had a lot more issues, but it's just him. It's his personality. He's just, he's great.
Did it take a while for him to realize this is actually my forever home?
Not really. Again, we used to joke that he'd go off with anyone, but no, not really. He got it. But I think he loves grandparents and cousins and uncles, and like he loves that extended family. He loves food. I mean, he is, most people, like my other two are chicken nuggets and chips. He is like, read me the menu, mom. And he's like mussels and lobster, and he wants to try everything, and he wants to be cooking all the time. And I mean, one of the harder things was him being on his own. He wasn't used to being on his own. And if we kind of said to him, go and play on your own, there was definitely an element of rejection there. Like he felt a bit rejected. He'd never learned to kind of self-play. Like I can see the gaps he's missing, because I also have a 3-year-old, so I can see the gaps that he missed. Whereas a 3-year-old kind of learned to play on his own just for, 20 minutes or whatever, and be in his own imagination. That is almost rejection to my son. Now he's gotten better, but in the first 6 months to a year, definitely we'd have to say to him, he would almost feel wounded if we told him to go to his room to play, or just go outside and play, or do something on your own. He's more comfortable doing jobs. Sorry, that's the easiest way to say it. We think that they were just brought along to do jobs. He would cook a lot, and they would sit in the morning. He talks about making the roti, or he's brilliant at cleaning. He'll do wash windows or do anything for you. But you're like, you're a kid, just play. So that's the difference.
Does he remember his pals?
Yeah, but he doesn't talk about it too much. I mean, we talk about it, and then he wouldn't talk about it at all for the first while. Like he just wouldn't. And to be honest, if he would see an Indian person, he would just clam up. We were trying to encourage him to keep his language, but he just wouldn't do it. So no, we might come back. They learned a bit of Maltese. He was there for a year, and then he's learning Irish now. So we sometimes say to him, what count to 10 in Hindi, or just trying to put. No, he's not feeling it. He's not feeling it. Apparently it's normal, but yeah.
What did your daughter make of all this? This guy turning up all of a sudden. Who the hell is this fella?
She was good, but she's just like my brothers, she's funny. She's she was used to being the first grandchild on one side, the only girl, she's still, they all need you. I try my best to give them at least an hour on their own a week, if I can. Just not always good, but I do really try just to give them or have our things, like with one it's cooking, with one it's music, just kind of have our things on our own little hobbies together. But yeah.
Now,
but they're fine, they're good.
Is there any other weird book you read, or any other thing you experienced that you actually haven't explored yet?
That I want to?
Yeah, I'd be worried about you, Vanessa. You could do anything at any time.
Oh my God, you're so kind. No, it's funny. In terms of, okay, so travel, I mean, the travel has been my biggest hobby. I've gone everywhere I want to except Japan. So Japan is my last kind of, and just for climate change, I want to curb my long haul flights. So I'd like to try and be a bit more sustainable, because it can be a vegetarian forever and one flight does it all. So what else do I want to do? I don't know. It's small things. It's the usual. I want to learn the piano, and I'd love to write a book. Doesn't every journalist want to write a book? And no, but I'm in a good place. I mean, the move home was a big decision. We were going to move to France, and then we decided it was just going to be too complicated work-wise again. So we decided to move home, and we absolutely love Kinsale and feel very privileged, to be honest. I'm happy to just chill for a while. I'm enjoying my new job, and I'm enjoying the people and nature. There's two massive things missing from Malta. The people were quite difficult, and there was no nature. So,
and in all likelihood, is this it now? Will you stay in Ireland?
Everyone says that. We'll definitely buy a place in France. We can get the ferry across so that we can sustainably, as much as possible, travel across. And yeah, that's it. No, it sounds so cheesy, but I'm very content. I'm in my 40s now. Everyone talks about happiness versus contentness. And I think being content is such a blessing, and I think there's no way to measure it, but I think it's unfortunately people talk about wealth, the wealth gap, but I think the contentness gap in the world is huge as well. And I think the average person has more money or, food in their bellies and shelter and blah, blah, blah. But I think people are it's been proven already since COVID how lonely people are, how bad anxiety is and mental health issues. So I think just to be happy, 4 healthy parents we've healthy kids, we've our own health. I think it's a very special time, and I'm trying to just live in the moment a bit more and not be galloping towards some other project.
And you've spent 20 plus years in media, from print to radio to TV to hosting a podcast. Where do you see the whole thing going? And if you were to describe that window was such an incredible window of change. How do you even, I don't know, describe all of that and even predict what's going to happen next?
I don't know. I mean, all we talk about in the industry is throw spaghetti at the wall, especially when it comes to social media, you know? So people obviously want content. There's no issue there. People want content. Is it just content in a different package instead of doing, you know, for Al Jazeera, I would be doing 20-minute interviews, but we would only be using a minute. We would be using, they had to be under a minute, 2 minutes max if it was a big guest. But that's what you're dealing with. You know, I've gone from TV, which was 26 minutes of a news bulletin on repeat. And now that just doesn't really, that's on the way out too. You know, nobody really watches news anymore. No one sits down for news. So I think the interest is there, to be fair. I think Gaza has shown that people are still interested in the news, but I worry about the level of noise. I worry about the quality. The quality is in some ways good because the story is getting out, you know, by the people on the ground. But I do worry about the quality in terms of the person watching it and the context that is lost. And I just think you still need journalists to put context on things and to kind of zoom out a bit and have that, you know, the likes of Robert Fisk, or these people that have so much knowledge in a region to be able to explain it and contextualize it and say, okay, this is happening now. I mean, like, look at Russia and Ukraine, like that's just fallen off the map in terms of media coverage. Yemen never got any coverage. Why did it not get any coverage? Sudan, there's issues there as well. And it's just like Ecuador, there's huge stories in Ecuador at the moment. Nobody knows, you know, so it's very difficult. It's very difficult. So my point is we have more like 24/7 eyeballs on phones looking at things, but it's all algorithms, isn't it? It's all like the more people want, the more people get. To put it to you this way, I always describe news as your meat and your vegetables, okay? People want the meat, they want the steak, they want the steak, they want the steak, but in a proper balanced journalism, you give them the vegetables too. And I just think we're consuming too much meat at the moment. We used to talk about this as far back as tabloids. Do you give people more of the same story that they wanted, or do you say, well, also this is happening, you know, because then people are constantly complaining the media didn't cover that. It's like, they did, but you didn't want it. And it's so we got a time for the coverage, you know?
When I chat to people in our little spiel when it comes to training and social media and all that kind of stuff and media generally, I show them the cover of the Cork Examiner. And it's from a particular issue in June 1980. And I tell people that I started working in media when I was 13. And I actually did genuinely. But it was kind of in a different way. A little corner shop had closed down across the way from us. We had a man living next door to us who worked for the Cork Examiner. So my dad gave me a kick in the backside. There's a bit of business to be done there. So instead of the newspapers being delivered to the corner shop, they now deliver them to our front door. They actually used to put it into a bin, a little black bin we'd have in the front. So before I go to school, when I was 13, and after I come home from school, delivering the Cork Examiner or the Evening Echo. And I flick through the paper and I think, in the newspaper, the big stories go on the front page. Then you go to the next pages, and of course then there's a business section, the news and the farming and sport and whatever else. So if you wanted news, you go to that section. And what you did have was intelligent people curating the news for you. They were showing you the most important thing and the less important thing. And if it's technology, it's sport, it's business, you know, the sustainability, whatever. And now you have so many, well, you don't have as many newspapers, but in the time in Ireland, as you know, we had 1 or 2 TV stations. We probably had 2. The radio stations were few and far between, but they were reliable places to go to get your news. And now you might think, well, we should be better informed because it's coming at us from all sides. But I think our ability to curate news isn't great. And instead you're getting the same thing multiplied by 80. Donald Trump said something stupid about NATO, and if he'd encourage Putin to attack any of the countries if he wanted to because they're not paying up or whatever. We hear that 80 times. And then that thing that you should know about that happened around the corner, we don't hear about it at all. So I think our ability to curate is just gone. That's why we do need the editors. We do need, the clever, intelligent people to do all of that without agenda and without politics layer on top of it. I really worry. We have a Russian girl working with us in Fusion. Lovely, lovely, lovely girl, Elena. And I have a guy in my podcast on a regular basis. I know we're recording this just before the 24th of February, 2 years of that invasion. So I had a guy from Kyiv on the podcast. He's an Irish guy. He's living out there and he's coming on the whole time. But it's like wallpaper. We don't even take notice of all of that anymore. And one of the regular conversations we have is about how brainwashed people are in Russia. And you think, fair enough, media is absolutely shut down, any bit of free speech at all. You think, well, that's terrible. And no wonder the Russians believe that Ukraine is full of Nazis and all that kind of business. But then you look at the States, where the land of the free and everything, when half the bloody country thinks the election was stolen. And you're like, hold on. In a free society, how can that happen? And then you realize it's just money and money and money. Then, of course, we drop things down to our social media channels. In a way, you kind of even wonder, how are the algorithms allowed to do what they do? And how are anonymous, unverified accounts able to go onto all of these platforms and say whatever they want? It's totally and utterly broken. 2024, we should have made progress. So if Vanessa or Greg wants to get, a nice breath of news, we would struggle to do it right now, wouldn't we? And you mentioned Robert Fisk earlier. As a person, he had a brand that you could trust. He was a quality writer and he wrote for quality newspapers most of the time. But you trusted them, so you knew they were great sources. They're disappearing on us. So it's a huge worry. It's a huge, huge worry. And I'm not sure if there's any solution for all of that.
No, I don't know. And I mean, again, it's back to sometimes I compare media to libraries. It's like people like the idea of it, but they're not willing to pay for it. I'm like, do you use a library? I mean, I use the library, but it's like people go, yes, for a society, we need libraries. They need to exist, but you won't need to use it. No, sure. How do you expect it to function then? And that's it. It's like are you going to pay for media? And it's not paying subscription. It needs to be paid for in people's taxes, I think media people, podcasts are one of the cheapest way to make, it's one of the cheapest way medias you can make, types of media. And I think they're amazing. It's my favorite source, to be honest. And I think they're saving a lot of people because the people who do want a little bit more slow news, they can go for the 20, 25 minute on one topic. And thank God they still exist because people just aren't buying newspapers or, that people won't pay. There's firewalls everywhere. People won't pay for them. So I don't know. I don't know where it's going. I really don't. But all I know is that until people connect, including myself, connect their mental health with their phone and realize that if you were going to let that in, I read something recently about if you're scrolling, your brain is going from dead child in Gaza to funny reel. And it's just your brain cannot actually process all of this kind of swing of emotions all the time. And it really resonated with me. And it made me realize that the chemistry of your brain is just not evolved to do it. And how important it is to just switch it off and go out. And it sounds so obvious. And also if you go on your phone, you just you think the world is so, so bad. There's a funny Tommy Tiernan sketch of 9/11 and he's like, I'm looking at the window and there's birds singing and there's the trees and the lovely day. And then I'm on the TV and I'm like, the world is effed, the world is effed. And then I'm looking out the window and I think of it all the time. And it's it is that thing of but wait, some of the Gaza coverage was horrendous and I had to filter a lot of it that never got out. So I'd be in this daze after doing it for 10 hours and I would kind of walk down into the village in Kinsale and just feel how is this normal? How are people smiling? And it's definitely secondary trauma and a kind of a grief that you're going through on a daily basis. You're trying to process it every day, but you don't have the time to process. So I think that's what people's phones do to them. That if you're trying to watch that 1 minute and then try and realize that the world is not a terrible place. At the same time, it's a lot.
And do you look at it or do you ignore it? Do you make a
I do
decision?
look at it.
At times we should look at it. It's important to look at it, but then it's easy then for people to say, do you know what, now I just don't want bad news anymore. So I'm going to ignore the horrible things that are happening everywhere and just stay in my own little cocoon.
I do. I mean, I look at it in a different way. I would still turn on Al Jazeera and watch Al Jazeera. I think it's brilliant. Their mantra is voice of the voiceless, and they really do. They go to places that people never go. And sorry, just on the financial thing. So, as I said, Doha, Qatar is the richest country in the world per capita. Their oil and gas money goes into Al Jazeera. Like, that was one of the most amazing things. Like, Al Jazeera is a philanthropic, unlike most other places. So their budgets are way bigger, and they're probably the only news organization that can really sit and go, what is worth doing? You know what I'm trying to say? They're not answerable to the taxpayers. It's not CNN, or BBC. So that made it a very interesting place to work as well, so stories are on merit. I wish more people watched it. So many people don't know about it, which is just breaks my heart when I tell people about it, because I think if people watched it for an hour a day, the world would be a better place, because they would understand that all of these different places and all of these beautifully told stories, not just all negative, it's amazing people, resourceful people doing things for the environment with nothing, But yeah, no, I don't turn it off. No, I would never turn it off. I'm addicted to news, but I consume it in a slightly different way. Like I said, I'm a very podcast person now. I like just a bit more slow news. I like to kind of understand a story a bit more. I like a bit more context.
I have a podcast called the Win Happy Podcast. I should bring you onto it sometime to chat about your life and your career. What do you think?
Maybe. tick. Another tick on my list of things I want to do, Greg.
Yeah, I know. There's lots of mad stuff that's absolutely going to happen. Of all of that time working, and what an adventure and amazing place to live, what was your happiest time working?
Oh, 100% Istanbul. 100% Istanbul. The people, the Turks are the most gorgeous, beautiful people. I mean, the night of the coup, I was in Ireland and my phone just started hopping. I turned on the news and there was Ortaköy Bridge, the main bridge with tanks all over it. I mean, we could see the bridge from our apartment, and just everyone was like, are you at work? Because we all traveled a lot. So, and shift work. So I was like, no. And then we were trying to figure out who was on, calling them. And I mean, it was even disturbing to watch CCTV footage back, even after it all happened very quickly. For people who don't remember, basically kicked off on a Friday night. A lot of my colleagues went on international news with a lot of drink in them. They were like drinking, and then they got calls from around the world. They were like, oh yeah, there's a coup. Is there? I don't know. I'm such a big city. Yeah, they all describe it. It was very scary. You see a soldier coming into our building, kicking through the glass and getting in, and a tank rolled up, kind of a jeep thing. I shouldn't say tank, kind of a jeep rolled up, and the offices were taken over, and the Turks stood up for all the expats. They stood. We couldn't, my colleagues, they couldn't speak English, or just couldn't speak Turkish, sorry, and they talked about just the Turks standing up toe to toe with the army. And then they were all got on buses. They got all our staff buses, and you were just put on a bus and told to go home. Everyone just told to go home, and people ended up. You have to remember, it's a city that crosses Europe and Asia, so everyone has a story about living in Istanbul that ends with, and then I ended up in Asia. If you're driving around, you're like, because you end up on the other side of the river. So, like, I know one of my colleagues ended up at our Turkish colleague's house in the middle of nowhere. She said it was so terrifying. And then everyone went home, and then the sonic booms happened. The jets started flying over, and lots of windows were smashed because of the sonic boom. So it was kind of a night of terror. A few people decided, that's it, I'm gone, I'm done, I'm not living here anymore. Some of the colleagues, but a lot got up on the Saturday morning. I personally believe if it had lasted 48 hours, a lot more of my colleagues would have left. But it was almost over as quickly as it started, because as we subsequently, it's highly likely that Erdogan knew it was happening, President Erdogan, and it was kind of ended up being called a controlled coup. And even by the 1 year anniversary, that was being like, it was framed as a totally different thing, but that's another story. But basically, yeah, so despite all of that, despite the bombings, I mean, another night I was out having drinks with friends. There was the Besiktas football stadium was bombed. We put a picture up on Instagram and everyone was were you okay? You were in the W. I was like, yeah, I'm home. I'm okay. The New Year's Eve guy who went in dressed as Santa into a nightclub and shot everyone. That was a half a kilometre from my apartment in Istanbul. I couldn't go running past it for 2 weeks. I was really traumatized by that one because he was on the loose for quite a while then. So, but yeah, it was still the best time. It was still the best time.
But it's still a lovely place.
Yeah, the people are amazing. The country's amazing. I've traveled a lot of places there in China now and Iran was amazing. Like any countries that are kind of self-contained and untouched, quite untouched, and just positive things. The Turks are just the most wonderful people. They are obsessed with food. They're obsessed with Turkish culture. They're extremely creative, artistic. All of the old trades still exist. So there's cobblers, there's tailors. You can just go to your cobbler, go to your tailor, go to your, it's lovely. They've just retained so much of the old world. But they're still amazing at production, what we're both in. Amazing at production, amazing at their soaps, their Turkish soaps are they're world famous because they're so elaborate and over the top, but beautifully produced. So again, amazing storytellers, amazing singers. And I've never lived somewhere where two people with massively opposing views can still be so respectful of each other,
It's still possible.
I don't want to pull the Malta thread, but Malta is not like that at all. But like people who are, you have a woman wearing a hijab sitting beside somebody who is, got their midriff out, tattoos, work, they completely respect each other at work. Just, they are, they might have opinions, but they would never be, they respect each other as people. And I loved it. And I was a much kinder person. When you live amongst them, you're much kinder. You would be constantly in the supermarket and you're like, no, you go ahead. You have 9 items. I have 10 items. No, you go ahead. Like this kind of thing, it's like we would go onto the bus with our daughter and they would just be like, quick, sit here. And then if a young person was on their phone, they'd be given a big elbow, get up, let them sit down, I blame Hollywood for a lot of it. Just this awful, people say to me, oh, the Turks. And I'm like, where does that come from? This is the only bit of kind of preachiness that I try. I'm like, ask yourself where that comes from. Where? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, just check your opinion sometimes. And that's what travel has done for me. Absolutely, is open my mind. I went to China, I traveled a lot, and when I went to China, I realized I kind of preconceived notions of China and Chinese people, and it was amazing as well. They're very funny. They're very interesting, funny people.
Yeah, and the gang in Kinsale, you're happy with that lot, are you?
Yeah, they're a different type of breed, all right. That's another breed, but it's great. And you know what? It's a great place to be a Bulashock. It's very welcoming, and people say, Galway, what do you do? Sure, Galway's lovely as well. Like, I know, but it rains a lot less down here, definitely.
So tell me, what's happiness to you?
What is happiness to me? Oh, I love that question. What is happiness to me? I use the word joy a lot. Just my kids, really. My kids, my husband, friends, food, having people over for dinner. Just love it. I love just red wine, some nice cheesy jazz mix on or something, background noise, or some Cuban mixed tape on, and just a bit of crack and chats and friendships, and my kids playing with my friends' kids, or my brother and his girlfriend and their niece and nephew, and my mom, and just people around, and that lovely warm sense of togetherness. Really, I love it.
Beautiful. And what's winning for you? Have you, the ball hits the back of the net and that moment of elation, and at this stage, what's winning like for you?
It's hard because it's winning as a mom. I never felt like a natural mom, I put my career. But winning with my kids is just seeing them succeed. Just, small things like my daughter had an art competition now. She was like finishing off her art, just seeing her going in. How did you get on? It was great, mom. Or, just their wins. I love, there's a real joy in that. My own wins. Yeah, look, I mean, me and my working mom friends talk about it all the time, the sacrifices, as a working parent, but mostly working mom, I have to say, where you're still holding back, you still have to hold yourself back a little bit. No, I think career-wise, I don't know. I'm very excited about the future. People keep saying to me, "You're going to be bored. You're going to be bored. It's not going to be international news." But I don't agree. I get excited by training younger people, younger journalists. I love that as well. I got a lot of joy out of somebody that's at their 21, 22, 23, and just at that start of their career. It's just so exciting, and you just want to say you can do anything, and you just, like, it's so cheesy that the world is your oyster, but it really is. You can just do anything. You're so light. You're just so light, and you can just go anywhere and do anything. And so winning to me is actually just being, like I said, content, happy, not stressed by my job, and just contributing, just being a cog in the wheel that helps. If I'm not doing any bad in the world, that's enough for me at the moment.
Yeah. And was there a day that you can think of where in the moment you were thinking, wow, this is the best day ever? Was there a best day ever? That feeling of, wow, this is just...
Oh, different ones. In the tabloids, it's such stupid things, but the tabloids, I remember the day we got, you remember the Euro Millions winner, Dolores McNamara?
Yeah.
And the Sun got the first picture of her, and the headline was Lotja, like Lotto. And it was just so much fun. I was just like, this is great. And then look, I've cried a lot in news. I've cried, I've had to go into the toilet and like bawl my eyes out doing horrendous bombing stories or that in Istanbul. But winning, just, yeah, and it was fun doing the podcast. I launched Malta's first English speaking podcast. That was good. It was really nice to be able to come into a smaller country and a smaller newsroom, even though they're amazing journalists. And just be able to kind of help people and help the structure of the newsroom maybe a little bit, and give them ideas and see things with an outside perspective. And just, I suppose, the confidence in your experience. There's a lot to be said for that. And it's nice to think back of the Vanessa who was terrified of everything, of like messing up in every way and thinking I was always wrong. And, to be kind of like, no, my opinion counts. And I have the experience now. And also just, when somebody younger might be stressing and you're like, it's okay, I'll fix it. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. You're not going to get in trouble. It happens. Things like that. Just, yeah, I like managing people too, like being a little bit of the elder now, I suppose.
Okay, my very last question, and if you can think of it, and you've had such a colourful time, there's so much going on with you. So what has been your best day ever so far?
In my life?
Yeah. Simple question.
Oh. Okay. You're really making me choose. Okay. It probably has to be the day my son was born, my 3-year-old, because my daughter's birth was very traumatic. I had to have an emergency C-section. And then my middle one's adopted. And then, so probably the day that he was born, because it was such a movie moment and I got to kind of heal all the trauma of my first awful birth. So I was in Malta and the nurses were amazing. And it was such a weird experience of being totally lucid but being cut open, and you're like chatting away like business end at the top. My husband was like, I could have put 2 cocktails between you and the anaesthetist, because we were just like, yeah. And then I said, just chatting away, and then this ginger baby pops out. We'd no idea what we were having. The staff were all obsessed because they'd never have ginger babies in Malta. They're all dark with brown eyes, and yeah, just to see him, and just to, it was the, we see the head, we see the shoulders, it's a boy, and it was just this movie moment, and it was amazing. So if I had to pick, don't tell my other kids, but that's probably why. Yeah, so that's probably the best day.
Cool.
And I just felt, it was lovely. It felt like that whole chapter was complete then, and that was a really nice, because it was long. The adoption made it long, just having kids. Even if everything goes smoothly, it's a tough journey for everyone, I think. So it just felt very nice. Our family was complete. We'd met everyone. We'd met everyone in the family then.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing the adventures of Vanessa Conneely with me. They've been colourful and lots more to come. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Greg. That was great.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. That's lovely.
No problem.
Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.